Good morning and welcome to the joint general session meeting of the ISO Board of Governors and WEM governing body. Please note that today's call is being recorded, and currently all attendees are in a listen-only mode. There will be opportunity for public comment throughout today's call, and we will make sure to give you all instructions on how to enter the comment queue at that time. With that, I'll now go ahead and turn the call over to Greg Fisher. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Everyone, welcome to the joint ISO Board of Governors and WEM governing body meeting, general session. I'm going to briefly call the roll to establish a quorum. I'm going to do this alphabetically. Chair Borenstein.
Here.
Vice Chair Campbell.
Here.
Member Decker.
Here.
Vice Chair Edo.
Present.
Governor Galetiba. Member Kanzioka online.
Here.
Governor Leslie.
Here.
Member, Shori.
Here.
And Chair Wagner.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum. I'm going to now explain briefly the public comment process for those in the room as well. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
I'm here, by the way.
Deborah Smith, I apologize. My list was delinquent, sorry. Okay, so now having established a quorum, I'm going to give the public comment requirements. For those in the room, we have comment cards that we'd like you to fill out on the side of the room over here. If you could bring those to the dais, we will make sure you are heard. For virtual attendees, we will ask you to raise your hand in the Zoom so that the operator can assist you with getting your mic muted or unmuted, excuse me, so you can make your comments at that time. I'm going to introduce the first item, which is the general welcome remarks from our joint chairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Good morning. I believe it's morning still. To those of us joining us here on the campus in Folsom and those of you joining us online, appreciate your time and attention today to our agenda that we have the opportunity to cover some items that are of interest to many stakeholders, particularly the formation committee. We also are going to do a little deeper dive into the congestion revenue allocation analytics. I cannot say that quickly. And then a briefing on the GHG reporting and accounting process, which has been a lot of work in the process and coming to a close on that. And just want to appreciate all of our stakeholders who attend meetings, working groups, and also shout out to the staff and the staff that has to herd us through these meetings. We appreciate all that you do. So on my grateful note, I will turn it over to Chair Borenstein.
Thanks, Rebecca. Rebecca said everything that I was going to say. We are here in late October, and last time we talked was early September, and we're in a new world with the passage of AB 825. I think it ended up getting numbered. This is our first discussion of how to navigate that, and that will be interesting. I think this is going to be a long and careful process we're going to go through to make sure we get from here to there. We appreciate the participation of everyone, all the stakeholders, and we especially appreciate all of the work that the staff have done and are going to be doing as we get from now till January 2028. So onward. And congratulations to everyone who helped make that, get us to a great outcome.
Okay, thank you both. At this time, we'll ask if anybody in the room has any public comment that is not affiliated with an agenda item. And seeing none, we'll turn it over to Silas. Please ask that same question of the virtual attendees.
If you would like to speak under general public comment, you can please press the raise hand icon at the bottom center of your Zoom screen or #2 if you are dialed into the phone line. Okay, we do not have any hands up in the general public comment queue.
All right, thank you. All right, so the next item is the decision on the June 19, 2025 general session minutes. I am seeking a motion at this time for the approval. Moved and a second.
Second.
Okay, so Galitova and Borenstein. I will now take the vote for this item. Chair Borenstein,
Aye.
Vice Chair Campbell,
Aye.
Member Decker,
Aye.
Vice Chair Edo,
Aye.
Governor Galitova, Member Kanzioka,
Aye.
Governor Leslie,
Aye.
Member Smith. Thank you. Member Shori
Aye.
and Chair Wagner.
Aye.
Okay, we have approval. Thank you. Next item, we're going to turn it over to Elliot Mainzer for the CEO remarks.
Thanks, Greg. Well, good morning, Chair Wagner, Chair Bornstein, members of the governing body and the Board of Governors. I will also keep my remarks very brief because I think, again, most of my sentiment has already been expressed. But I did want to also just reiterate on behalf of us, all of us at the CAISO, just a tremendous amount of thanks to so many people who've contributed to, I think, some really extraordinarily positive developments since we last met here as a group. Obviously, as Chair Bornstein mentioned, the passage of AB 825, obviously a monumental moment in energy policy and legislation in the West. We were very excited and really looking forward to hearing from Kathleen and Evie and Jim this morning on the next steps of the formation committee. They're doing a tremendous amount of work, and we appreciate all their leadership and the opportunity to support them on that work. And then, of course, the passage, the approval by the commission back in August of the EDAM congestion revenue allocation filing, as well as the EDAM tariffs for both Pacific Core and Portland General. Those were, I think, really important rulings and just gave us some additional sort of wind in the sails towards implementation of the extended day-ahead market, and really excited about the progress that we're making with market simulation, the other technical developments to be ready to go live next spring with Pacific Core. And then, of course, as I mentioned yesterday, just last week, NV Energy filed with the Nevada Public Utilities Commission to join EDAM. I think that's also extremely important moment. NV obviously represents a key piece of geography and connectivity in the extended day-ahead market footprint, and we really appreciate their work. And as I mentioned yesterday, I think that filing is really tremendous work, of course, pre-decisional still, but I think required reading for anybody that's interested in reliability and affordability in the Western Interconnect. So today's agenda, thanks in advance again to our colleagues at the Formation Committee. And as we've committed, more work to be done over the long term on congestion revenue allocation. We know we're still in a sort of a transitional phase there, and looking forward to hearing from Guillermo in terms of some of the analytics that we're starting to reveal there. We've committed to that at the decision meeting, and we'll continue to stay transparent and open on those issues. And then thanks also to Anya Gilbert, who is going to talk about, I think, a really nice and important new piece of reporting transparency for GHG. It's I think, a service that's going to be really helpful to our EDAM entities and others without requiring a tariff revision. So great job there. And just thanks again to all of you. Really appreciate the work that you do to support us here at the CAISO. And I will also just thank my team for being just super awesome and just doing a great job. So thanks again, everybody, and looking forward to the meeting today.
Thank you, Elliot. The next agenda item is the Formation Committee update for the Westwide Governance Pathways Initiative. Stacey Crowley, please.
Thank you, Greg, and good morning, governors and governing body members. As Elliot mentioned, we're going to shift gears now to hear about the Westwide Governance Pathways Initiative. The Formation Committee has been busy engaging stakeholders to help shape what is a durable and inclusive governance framework for the region. We're joined by Jim Shetler, Kathleen Stacks, and Evie Call, who will share updates as the committee really ramps up their work across a variety of work streams. So I'll turn it over to you three, and good morning.
Thanks so much, Stacey, and hello, board members and governing body members. It's great to be back in front of you. And I think maybe in the vein of all of the appreciation that has already been shared, I think I'd like to start just by on behalf of the formation committee and the launch committee, thanking the CAISO team for all of the collaboration we've had thus far and know that we have ahead of us. We are really viewing this as a partnership and are thrilled to have such great partners as you all and the staff at the CAISO. So starting with some thanks as well. Next slide, please. So we're gonna cover a handful of things, just a pretty high level update this time. The latest on our governing documents, our upcoming board selection process, a work plan update, and some funding. So we'll go to the next slide and I'll turn it over to Evie.
Good morning. So we've been working on our governance documents for the last few months. We have been supported by our counsel, Perkins Coie, who's been instrumental. We're working with the Delaware templates because, as you know, the RO will be forming in Delaware. And we're targeting a January filing for all of the corporate documents. We've been working, as Kathleen said, to stay closely aligned with the CAISO staff, and they've really been terrific support in this regard, given the close relationship that the RO and the CAISO are going to have. So we've also had liaisons from the CAISO board at times, the governing body, the WEM governing body, and BOSSR. So we've had a full complement of input into these documents. I wanted to highlight a few points of context before we really talk about the documents themselves. So there will be a lot of documents that the RO has, as you well know. There will be policies and other things we'll be working on that will go into specifics. But the governance documents we're working on now, the bylaws and articles and the 1023, really are relatively high-level documents because they need to be durable so that we don't need to amend them very often. So as a result, a lot of the step 2 proposal itself is going to end up in policies. We'll talk about the selection policy, for example, open meeting and records policies. There will be a lot of things outside of these governance documents that we are working on currently. And we're also making sure that we build documents that stay in step with AB 825. As you know, the CAISO has the job of going through and making sure that the RO meets the requirements that were set out in the statute, a long list of requirements. So what we're trying to do in the bylaws is to put as much in the bylaws that shows compliance with those principles as we can reasonably. It's made for a little bit odd bylaws, but in general, I think we've made it work. So the bylaws themselves really are focusing on the purpose of the governance, which is, to oversee markets and future voluntary services. To a large extent, they're very typical for bylaws around board selection, voting, meetings, records, etc. The only unique part of the bylaws probably is the area of public interest. Section 4 of the bylaws deals with a number of public interest-oriented features of the RO design, which were very important, and they'll also be important as a 501c3. So it emphasizes the use of a public policy committee of the board, the Office of Public Participation, which is new, the RO-funded consumer advocate organization, and the continuing roles for the BOSSR and a stakeholder representative committee, which will have probably a broader role than today's RIF has. And importantly, again, going back to the statute, there's a commitment in the bylaws to respect, accommodate, and not unduly burden states' achievements of their own policy objectives. So we've posted these on the WEB landing page. We've only gotten comments from 4 entities, and we've only actually had one area of extended debate, I'll call it, not even controversy, which is the role of the market expert in the organization. To the next page. We also have been working on a certificate of incorporation. It's much more standard, very little specialization or detail in that document. Again, it will be filed in January along with the bylaws. And then we're currently gearing up the Form 1023, which will be filed with the IRS sometime in January in order to get 501c3 qualification from the IRS. And there will be, a number of components to that, but the 2 things that are most notable here are we have to develop a business plan and a 3-year budget. So we are currently working very hard on those two pieces to get the 1023 prepared. So again, all these documents will be going in January so that the RO becomes a legal entity with a 501c3 designation. Back to you, Kathleen.
Thanks, Abby. The next thing that we have in front of us is our board selection process. Just wanted to give a quick high-level overview of the timing, and then recognizing that the timing does indeed overlap with governing body nominating committee selection process, throwing all the words in there in a way that doesn't make any sense, but you know, the process for the governing body to select a new member will overlap. Talk a little bit about how we're thinking about that. So we have we sent out an RFP for an executive search firm to help us with the nominating committee management and board candidate process yesterday. So we received some recommendations from some folks of some firms to send that out. So we have done that. We've also posted that RFP on the website that WEM hosts for us. We are in the process of getting all of our sectors formed for those who have that had not existed up to this point, and having nominating committee representatives selected by the middle of November. We will begin our board selection process in January and are looking to seat 5 initial board members by July. Next slide, please. Again, recognizing that we have 2 processes that are overlapping, and that we are also dealing with a launch committee where, you know, and a limited number of stakeholders who serve in all of these roles. We wanted to ensure that we had a sort of a process for thinking through conflicts and making sure that we've got different people in different roles. So we sort of put together this little graphic to demonstrate that we need to have different representatives on the nominating committee process for the RO board versus the WEM governing body process. So there will be different folks serving on those nominating committees, recognizing again that they will be happening at the same time. And that ultimately, when we are seating this initial board, the process that we have set up is that the nominating committee will identify a slate of candidates and bring that slate to the full launch committee. The launch committee will actually take a vote on that slate, and then recommend that slate, or whatever slate, if we need to go back and go through that process. But we'll ultimately recommend a slate to the formation board, which has the official vote on the initial board members. So we also didn't want the nominating committee representatives and the launch committee representatives to be the same folks, because we didn't want to have people voting twice on the same thing. So trying to make sure that we've got distinct processes and kind of conflict checks for each of those roles. So that's how we're approaching the board selection process starting in January. Next slide, please. We've also started conversations, and a lot of this has been in collaboration again with the CAISO staff, on what are the various work streams that we need to use as we look to implement the step 2 final proposal. And we recognize that the work group structure that we had in place with the launch committee in the process of developing that final proposal really did work very well. We were able to bring in voices from outside the launch committee and have folks sort of focus on specific topics that they had more expertise or interest in to help us develop those proposals. And so we've identified a set of work streams that that we both currently have, are at the beginning of setting up, and that we'll be setting up as we move forward. So again, the governing documents work group is almost done with their work. The board selection process, this will be likely a group of people from the launch committee that kind of help ensure that process moves smoothly. since we don't have a staff to help us manage this at that level. We've got a work group thinking about funding for the RO for the next couple of years that Jim's going to talk a little bit more about. We will have a group that's looking at what the tariff modifications need to be and how we want to legally set up the RO. This is one that's an important that we will engage with the CAISO in sort of strategic moments, recognizing along with the RO CAISO agreement that we will ultimately have to sort of represent our own interests, but that there's a lot of collaboration that needs to happen leading up to that point. The RO CAISO agreement work group is something that we will start to activate later on once we have some of the work from the initial work streams done. The state consumer advocates are working to set up the consumer advocate office. We've got a group working to develop a scope for the Office of Public Participation, which will be a department within the regional organization. And then we've got a stakeholder process, which is actually going to have several components, but obviously this is another one where we'll be working very closely with the CAISO to figure out how are we stakeholdering between now and when the RO goes live? How are we setting up the stakeholder process once the RO goes live? How are we working with the RIF, recognizing that the RIF has a lot of interest and has thrown out some recommendations for to implement some of the recommendations from the final proposal as well. So the work of the work groups will come up to the formation committee for review, and then ultimately up to the launch committee for full approval until we get to that point where we've got an initial board seated, and then we'll work with the board to figure out how they want to handle this workflow as well. But starting to put this structure in place, we thought was really important just to start to organize and identify the tasks that we have ahead of us. And with that, I will pass it back to Jim to talk about.
Actually, Kathleen, this is
yeah.
Severin, if I can just,
Sure.
maybe this is a question for just to tee up, Jim. On the funding work stream, I would, based on what else is on these work streams, I'm assuming that is both the raising and the spending of money, in particular, the budget. But the next slide only really addresses the raising of the money. And I guess, is there somewhere more, and maybe I got it and I forgot about it, but more of a detail of that budget?
You
Jim.
want me to take that, Kathleen?
Yeah, go ahead.
Whoever.
Thank you, Severin. I always appreciate your questions. Good morning, Board of Governors and governing body members. Jim Schretler, General Manager for the Balancing Authority of Northern California, and I do serve on both the Launch Committee and the Formation Committee. So yes, we do have a detailed budget that we've developed for the next 3 years. The next 2 years, 26 and 27, are the formation efforts, working with creating the organization. And then we're in the process right now of trying to finalize the initial budget for the first year of operations of the ROWE in 28. So happy to share that. It is, those are posted, but I'm happy to share those with the staff so they can get those to both the organizations so you can look at that. As far as expenditures, we do have a firm or an agency that we're working with called Global Impact that manages the money for us. They take the collections that we've received so far, account for those, and disperse those expenditures based on direction of the Formation Committee. So hopefully, Severin, that addressed your question, but happy to go into more detail if you'd like.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Can I just ask, the $7 million is just for 26 and 27, right?
Yes, and
You
so
mentioned 3 years, but
yes, so maybe to go over that a little more. So right now we're estimating, and I would say between 7 to 8 million for the first 2 years of startup. And then in looking at the budget for 2028, not final yet, but it's somewhere in that $12 to $15 million range for that first year of operation.
Great, thanks.
So in looking at funding, we are right now looking at 3 general sources of potential funds. One is stakeholder contributions, and we're very proud of the fact that we were able to raise over $800,000 to get us through the effort to date. But we also recognize we need about 10 times that amount in order to get us through the next 2 years. Another area of focus is grants. I believe we have mentioned in the past, we did apply for a federal grant through DOE. For one brief shining moment, we did actually have that awarded to us. And then January 21st came along and that changed that. So we are not counting on that federal money at this time. We have started outreach to other organizations who do grant issuance and have had a fairly positive conversation with one entity so far, and we'll be continuing that. And then the third area we're evaluating is debt financing. This is not a new concept. If you look at some other entities that have created markets, they've looked at debt financing for startup. Some of the CCAs have done that for their formation. So we are evaluating that as an option as well. And then we will certainly balance scope against budget as we move forward to determine how best to implement. With that, I'll throw it back to Kathleen, and we're ready for any questions.
Thanks.
Very
Thanks,
quickly,
Jim.
with regards to the debt financing, that would basically be a loan that would allow you to then repay it once there's a revenue stream. Is that what the structure would look like?
Correct. The concept would be a loan that would be repaid through the revenue stream under the tariff that would be in place once the organization gets started up.
Yeah, okay. Well, that should be doable. Expensive, but doable. Thank you.
And if I may just really kind of tying together one of the things that Evie was talking about, and then ultimately what Jim was talking about. We are working on a 3-year budget right now, mostly because we have a requirement to file a 3-year budget with the IRS with all of our incorporation documents. And so we've put together a sort of mostly a draft for that 2028 timeline that we are kind of working through right now. It is going to be very much an estimate that as we get closer to 2028, we will be working on what do the actuals look like. So I think this is reviewing this very much as a placeholder for, as we stand today, what we expect that first year of the RO's functions to look like. So that's kind of tying that together. And I think, Severin, to your question, having a group working with the RO board once they are in place on that actual budget as we get closer to 2028 will be a really valuable thing. Hopefully we've got staff in place by then as well that can really be kind of managing that process once we get closer to that. So I think we're happy to take questions.
Thanks, Kathleen.
At this time, I'll open up to the governing body and the board for any other questions of the committee. Seeing none. Oh, sorry, Rob. You're up. Go, Rob.
Thank you, Greg. Kathleen, Jim, Evie, good to see you this morning, and thank you for joining us. Always good to see these updates and the progress, and as noted, really substantial certainty now and moving forward. Kathleen, you mentioned a bit about the RIF and the work that they're doing. We heard from the RIF 2 days ago on their efforts on trying to put together a plan that would allow them to transition over after the regional organization is formed. And I'm just curious, from the formation committee perspective, You mentioned it's being monitored and you're looking at the documents that they've prepared and the comments that they've made. Is this being supportive of, have you had any communication with them? Are you encouraging them? Do you see this as you know, a really preferred way to get there, or is it just silent?
That's a great question, Rob. Thank you. And I will say that we are very closely coordinating with the RIF and with the CAISO. And so we have kind of recognizing that these are that, you know, we are an independent group, the RIF is an independent group, and the CAISO is independent. You know, having the three of us come together and try to figure out how can we work together because I think the proposal that the RIF has put out is a really fantastic way to think about how do we move from what we have today to having a full stakeholder representative committee where we really are talking about many of the same folks who are engaging on this. We're not duplicating efforts, and you know, if we can all come together and kind of agree on these next steps. Our conversations with the RIF representatives have been fantastic and very collaborative, and so we're I think feeling very much like we are aligned with the path forward, and that we will be working together to identify the details and you know, what's working, what's not. It kind of feels like we've got the opportunity to have a little lab to try out the various functions and make adjustments as we need to. So.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, yeah, the RIF, I think, has done a good job of noting, you know, the challenges of where they are today and getting to where it needs to be, which they can't do until the RO is actually formed, and it's now that responsibility and the gaps. So I'm really pleased to hear that that's really at the forefront and it is being very actively managed and trying to make it as positive an experience as possible for everybody involved. So thank you for those clarifications.
Happy to.
Any other questions? Yes. Oh, go ahead, Member Decker.
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys for being here again and really appreciate it. And you're not getting a lot of questions from us. And so just for people that are listening in, you know, we're staying pretty close together with what you guys are doing. And we feel like we're pretty well informed along the way. So it's good to hear from you guys. Absolutely. Please keep doing that. But if the people on the phone or people in the audience are wondering why we're not asking questions, it's because we are staying pretty tied out with this. And I would only comment that, you know, Governor Shorey is on the formation committee. Andy and I are on the formation committee. And so we also are communicating with our colleagues about the progress. So just so you don't think we're just not paying attention.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Just to clarify, we're liaisons to the formation committee.
Good clarification. All right, at this time, without any further questions from the governing bodies, do we have any questions in the room or comments? Seeing none, turn it back over to Silas to see if there's anybody online.
If you'd like to make a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon on Zoom or #2 on the phone line. All right, no hands up in the virtual queue.
All right, thank you. All right, without further ado, we're going to move on to agenda item 5, which is briefing on extended day ahead market congestion revenue allocation analytics. We do have one public comment letter that I want to acknowledge for the governing body and the board. That was from Appian Way Energy Partners, and it has been provided to all members as well as posted publicly. I'll turn it over to Anna.
Thank you, Greg. Good morning, ISO Board of Governors and WEM governing body members. Excuse me. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I just got a frog in my throat there. Sorry about that. Good morning. I have the pleasure of introducing Guillermo Bautista today to present to you where we are at with the analytics on the congestion revenue allocation for EDEM. And as you might recall, when you all approved this item earlier this year, we committed to conduct some additional analytics before and after implementation of the proposal. Thank you. In response to concerns raised by the Market Surveillance Committee, the market expert, and stakeholders. This analysis is now underway, And today, Guillermo will share with you that we have structured the analysis in 3 phases, and he'll be reporting on some of the results from the first phase. As you will also recall is that when we brought this to you and you approved the proposal, we emphasized that this design was transitional, and we committed to initiating a stakeholder initiative as soon as possible for a longer-term framework, and a framework that would avoid the current asymmetries as well as any incentive for self-scheduling as part of the design. This remains a priority for us and stakeholders, and we acknowledge the public letter submitted today by APN Way. And I want to confirm our commitment to this next phase, and I'm pleased to share that we will be initiating that next phase next month, which is 2 days from now. But next month, early next month, we'll initiate that stakeholder initiative, and that will is a complementary to the work that we're doing on the analytics here. I also wanted to share that with regards to this first phase and the outcome of the first phase of Guillermo's analysis, that with regards to the asymmetry that exists between the CAISO BAA and the Pacific Core area, them being the first entrant, we see from the results that there isn't any meaningful lost revenue because the analysis does show that the CAISO flows over the PAC BAA are more negligible, and therefore there isn't a significant loss of revenue with that. And so the asymmetry doesn't negatively impact us as much. However, I also want to note that with regards to the concerns on funding of CRRs, as noted in the APN Way letter submitted today, that the analysis does show that there's more meaningful impact on the CAISO system, and there will be less revenue associated with the funding of CRRs as a result of that. But I also wanted to note that that is an issue that we've been analyzing and exploring in our current congestion revenue rights initiative, and it's sourced today. There is no revenue for parallel flows, and it does cause revenue inadequacy. And with that, I want to reiterate our commitment to continue our work on the congestion revenue rights to ensure that we get to the root cause of these issues, and we will address those root causes in that initiative, and of course, our continued work on congestion revenue allocation. And with that, unless there are questions of me, I would like to turn it over to Guillermo. Okay, Guillermo.
Thank you, Anna, for the background introduction. Good afternoon. Chair Borenstein, Chair Wagner, members of the board, members of the governing body. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here this morning to provide an update on the analysis we are performing for better understanding the implications of the revised methodology that we implemented early this year, policy-wise, for the allocation of congestion revenues. I will go first through some basic background of the technical aspect. I will follow that with some explanation of the plan that we have developed, and I will conclude with some findings of the analysis that we have so far. Most of the analysis that we have done so far is related only to the area of the extended day-ahead market for day one. That is going to be composed by Pacific Corporation West, East, and the California ISO balancing area. In that construct of a footprint, when there is a transaction in one area, it may cause flows in another area. That is what we typically refer as parallel flows. One of the key designs is then, given the congestion rents that are going to be collected because there will be a surplus of money, is then how to allocate that congestion revenues. As the original design of the day-ahead market that we are implementing, there was a key component about the methodology to allocate congestion revenues. That methodology was approved as part of the package of the extended day-ahead market and was approved by our regulator back in December 2023. That original logic relied on the fact that if there were congestion revenues associated only with the component of parallel flows, they would be allocated to the area where the congestion happens. If we have a transaction in PAC and is causing parallel flows in the California balancing area, on a constraint on that area, then the congestion would be allocated to the California balancing area, and vice versa. Given some concerns that were raised during the early stages of 2025, the CAISO initiated a stakeholder process. It was a very expedited and very narrow focus scope of a process to revise the methodology of the congestion revenue allocation. That was fully approved by our regulator this August 2025. And the new logic that is going to be implemented for day one is going to be such that when there are congestion revenues associated with parallel flows, instead of being allocated to where the congestion happens, they are going to be allocated where the congestion was paid. And this is the scope of the analysis that we are doing. Next slide, please. Let me step back a little bit to provide some background on the technical aspect of this. Again, given the very narrow footprint of the EDAM for day one, that is PAC West, PAC East, and California ISO balancing area, we have this configuration. There are direct links between Pacific East and Pacific West, and also from PAC West to California balancing area. If there is a transaction that may happen between PAC East and PAC West, we would expect, because the direct link, much of that power can flow through those direct links. However, there are laws of physics that basically define how the power is going to flow. And a portion of that flow is going to flow throughout the rest of the interconnection, to the point that some of those flows can actually go through the transmission constraints of the California ISO balancing area. That is what we call a parallel flow, and it's inherent to the footprint that we are dealing with. Now, the parallel flows are a physical reality that we have to recognize. This is just how the power is going to flow, regardless of what generation, what transactions, what contractual agreements we have. And this is how we have to reconcile the market construct with the reality of the transmission system. There could be specific scenarios at hand. One is when we have a transaction between PAC areas, and that can cause a parallel flow on the CAISO constraints. Here are some combinations. It will depend on the direction of the PAC transaction, whether it goes from PAC East to PAC West or vice versa, and the direction of the congestion that is happening in the CAISO balancing area. On the left-hand side of the illustration, we have this scenario where the parallel flow created by the PAC transaction is flowing in the same direction of the congestion internal to the CAISO area. In this case, that parallel flow is going to increase, is going to exacerbate the congestion on that constraint, and therefore is going to have an associated congestion revenue that we're going to charge for using that transmission capacity. And the opposite could happen if we have the reversal of the transaction. It could be that the parallel flow contribution is going to be in the opposite direction, as indicated in the right-hand side, to the prevailing flow of the internal constraint in the CAISO. In that case, is what we call a counterflow. That transaction, that parallel flow, is going to mitigate, is going to help relieve the congestion on the CAISO constraint. And therefore, the congestion revenues for that transaction are going to be actually negative for that contribution of the parallel flow. It could go either way, and the same setup can be defined for the other way around, when we have transactions in the CAISO system that could impose parallel flows on either PAC West and PAC East. And again, it will depend on the directions of those transactions and the direction of the prevailing congestion happening in the hosting area. Next slide, please. Given all the interest about the implications of the congestion revenue allocation, the CAISO committed to perform further analysis to better understand the implications and the potential incentives that this revised methodology could create in the performance of the extended day-ahead market. This was memorialized with the opinion of the Market Surveillance Committee and also the feedback from the market expert for the governing body. And they provided a long list of suggestions about what type of analysis we could perform to better understand what is going to look like when we go live with extended day-ahead market. The ISO committed to perform this analysis before the market goes live. That is one of the key asks. Can we have some realization how this could play out before we actually go live with the extended day-ahead market. We have consulted with the Market Surveillance Committee the plan that we developed, and we are going to have a plan with 3 stages. The briefing today contains partially the information that we have for the first stage for the analysis that we have performed so far. Next slide, please. The way we structure this analysis is quite sequential and logical in terms of what access we have to the data that is available. The first stage is fully based on historical information of congestion related to the Western energy imbalance market. We know the patterns of congestion, we know the prices of congestion, and that could be a baseline to understand how the dynamics, how the congestion is going to play out once we are in the extended day-ahead market. And this is quite important to highlight because, just to set a note of caution here, this exercise is not to foresee how the actual solution is going to look like. There are many nuances to compare day ahead versus real time, but the purpose of this first stage is predicated on the fact that congestion is inherent to the configuration of the transmission system. Yes, there would be impacts based on how participants bid, what transmission rights are exercised, but the inherent configuration, the inherent dynamics of the congestion is very rooted to the actual configuration of the transmission system. And that is the reason in this first stage, we focus mainly on these flow contributions, flow impacts of the constraints in the system. And that will give us a good reference of what dynamics, what profiles, what patterns we expect to see once we are in the EDAM live. The second stage goes a step further, and we continue to rely to some extent on historical information of the Western energy imbalance market, plus information we're going to be generating with the newly available system that we have for running the day-ahead, the extended day-ahead market. As you may know, we are in the phases of implementation. We are basically completing the stage of market simulation, and in early February, we're going to start with parallel operations. This is a very good opportunity for us to leverage on that additional capability to do simulations, to do some stress cases, to see potentially how the new logic of the extended day-ahead market is going to actually play in the EDAM footprint. These 2 pieces together is what is going to compose the second phase, and we will be reporting later on that. Also, as a reference for the first stage, we are expecting to post a public report with the analysis and findings that we have for this first stage. We are scheduled to do that before the end of the year, most likely in early December. These are the 2 stages that we are performing before we go live, to really have a good foundation, good understanding how potentially the dynamics, the patterns of congestion are going to play in the day-ahead market. This is going to be complemented with a third stage that is effectively doing the monitoring, the assessment of the, not only of the congestion revenue allocation, but across the spectrum of the functionality of the extended day-ahead market once we are live. This is using actual operational data of the extended day-ahead market. Next slide, please. Let me just summarize the findings that we have. For your reference, we also have an appendix to the presentation. I will not cover that in this briefing. It's just complementary information to support the findings that are summarized in these 2 slides. The reference material that we're using is real-time congestion for the period of January 2024 all the way through August 2025. And we are specifically focusing only on the congestion interplay between PAC East, PAC West, and California balancing area, because these are the footprint for the go live. Now, when we look into the congestion, more specifically into the power flow dynamics that happen in this specific footprint, we can come with the first finding, and that is, yes, there can be significant impact of flow on the CAISO constraints due to transactions in the Pacific area, what we call the parallel flows. In some cases, depending on the specific constraint, that flow impact can be as high as 40%. That means if there is a transmission right, let's say going from Pack East to Pack West, 40 megawatts of that can flow potentially through some of the major transmission constraints of the California system. And again, that is inherent to the configuration of the transmission system. It's going to depend not only on that configuration, but the severity is going to be depending on the value of the transmission rights, the severity of the congestion that we're going to be pricing, and all this come together with a dollar figure that potentially we could have later on. Now, just to put some layers to this finding, yes, there can be significant impact of parallel flows on CAISO constraints. As a reference, we have on average about 150 constraints congested in the EDAM footprint, PAC, West, East, and California. Out of those, about 96% of the constraints are located in the California balancing area. That's the reason that it's expected that the impacts are going to be in the California balancing area. Now, another caveat to this conclusion is that out of these constraints in the CAISO balancing area, only about 21% of those could effectively have some type of parallel flow. There could be 145 constraints congested in the CAISO. Out of those, only 21% will effectively see an effect of parallel flows. And then the other level to this dimension is how frequently this could happen. This is another metric that we have in the analysis that, yes, it could be material for some handful constraints in the transmission system, but the frequency is relatively low. Typically, in the quarter, these constraints are binding no more than 6% of the time. So we can put all these dimensions to get a sense of how material that impact is going to be. On the other end, we also have the contrasting view of what is the dynamic for transactions in the CAISO area impacting, creating parallel flows in the PAC areas. And this is a very asymmetrical conclusion because what we see first is that there are very few constraints getting congested in the PAC areas. Out of the 150, about 5 constraints are congested in Pacific East, and about 1 constraint is congested in Pacific West. So it's quite a symmetrical level of constraints congested in different areas. Now, they get congested more frequently, up to 30% of the time. The key point here is that even though they get congested more frequently, even though there are few constraints, the actual flow contribution impact is pretty negligible, less than 0.5%. That means that no matter what transactions we have in the CAISO balancing area, the parallel flows that they are going to be creating in the PAC area is going to be negligible. And this is very contrasting to the effect that we may have for the other direction of the transaction. Transactions in PAC can have significant flow impact on the CAISO transactions. When we put this in reference to the congestion revenue allocation, this is what Anna was alluding earlier today. There could be significant flows and therefore congestion revenues that are going to be collected on PAC transactions, on CAISO constraints that are going to be returned back to PAC. On the other end, there will be very few congestion revenues collected on PAC constraints from CAISO transactions that within the scope of this revised methodology are not coming back to the CAISO. So the lost revenue is going to be negligible for the CAISO in this sense. Next slide, please. The second set of findings are more granular and intended to address specific questions posed by the Market Surveillance Committee to better understand the dynamics of congestion in the EDAM footprint. One of those is, when does the congestion happen? And there is supporting information in the appendix where you can see the profiles of the congestion, and it's very well defined. And as expected, the congestion is mainly driven by the solar production. You are going to see these patterns of congestion happening as early as hour ending 8, going all the way through hour ending 19, 20, depending on the season of the year. And in some cases, depending on the region, we can have high congestion during the peak hours of the day, meaning the peak of the demand of the day. That could be whether in the winter conditions for the Pacific Northwest or in the summer conditions for the CAISO. And they are very well-defined patterns. Now, the severity of congestion is another factor that we find pretty straightforward in such a way that the majority of the congestion, again, about 96% of the constraints congested happen to be located in the CAISO, where the parallel flow impacts could be more material for transactions coming from PAC. Price-wise, again, this is based on real-time prices. It's not a prediction of what the day-ahead prices are going to be. But when we see the consequence of the congestion reflected on prices as part of the marginal congestion component, we can see that the most significant component of congestion is for congestion sourcing from the CAISO balancing area and impacting both PAC West and PAC East. Now, depending on the direction, depending on the location of the constraint, it may create specific patterns. And overall, for the whole period reported, we can see that congestion in the CAISO area tends to depress the prices in the Pacific East area because the congestion is negative, and tends to increase the prices in the Pacific West area because the congestion is positive. At the same time, when we compare the congestion impact sourced from the Pacific East or Pacific West areas into the CAISO area, you can see that they are not even a few pennies. They are in the round of noise, dollar-wise, indicating that given the very few constraints that we have in the PAC areas and given how low flow impact they have, it is reflected in the prices. Basically, there is no impact on prices, or they are very, very negligible. This is all the material that I have for this briefing. Again, there is an appendix with companion information to support the findings of these two slides. I will be happy to take on any questions you may have.
Terrific presentation. I just have one quick question on.
Microphone, please.
I thought, oh, okay. I just have one quick question on when the congestions occur. You said it was parallel to the solar generation. So is that the evening peak that we were looking at mostly when solar goes down, or is it during the day?
It is during the day. The majority of the congestion occurs between hour ending 8 and hour ending 20 because it's when the transmission system is mostly loaded with all that generation.
Okay, okay. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, thank you.
Governor Bornstein.
Thanks, Guillermo. This is great. Can I ask slide, the slide that says additional observations based on WEIM? This is based on the first approach. I'm going back up, where this is just taking behavior as given. This is not the second approach, which is incorporating strategic response, correct?
Correct. This is just using historical information as given, and that implies that we take the behavior as given.
Okay, but there will be a second analysis that does the second bullet point of your approach, which looks at incentives.
Yes, and we are expecting to use some simulation scenarios where we are potentially changing the bidding patterns of participants to see how that affects the congestion.
So let me ask, just so that I understand this table at the bottom of the slide, PAC W 2.67, $2.67 per megawatt hour. I'm trying to figure out which megawatt hours, per megawatt hour of what? Could you just clarify that for me?
The 2.67 is a total average for the whole period of January 2024 through August 2025, only for the congestion component, for congestion arising only from constraints located in the CAISO balancing area. It's an average MCC.
Okay, but if I wanted to know the total transfer, and again, I understand this is just taking historical, I would actually multiply that by the entire PAC West megawatt hours during this period?
It will depend what metric you may want to achieve. If the idea is to try to come with an estimate of the actual congestion revenues, is a little bit more complicated because it's not a price associated with one single balancing area, it's a price associated with 2 points where the transaction is happening. So the underlying data would be to collect the congestion revenues of parallel flows for each transmission constraint and then sum up that. We could come potentially from that metric with an average price to get a sense of how expensive it is.
I'm actually interested in a different number, which is the total revenue transfer.
Yes.
And that doesn't seem, I may have missed it, but that doesn't seem to be in this presentation.
It's not in this stage of the analysis. We are potentially exploring that for the second stage, where again, we will have to take some approximation using historical information, the historical transfers that occur in the real-time market, including base schedules, to potentially bring that measurement of how many dollars we are talking about.
Yeah, and that would be useful, but I guess my impression was, since this is the sort of non-strategic analysis, it seems like there are just sort of a set of megawatt hours that are part of that, that we could multiply this by and just get a ballpark number. Are we talking millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions?
Yeah, it's coming in the next phase.
Okay, good.
This doesn't answer your question, but I think when we discussed this topic, when we brought this to the board and the governing body, I mentioned that the kind of the upper bound of that transfer capability between Pacific Core, East and West, I believe is about 1,500 megawatts. Now, that doesn't mean that that happens every day, every hour, but, and that's what I think the additional analysis can achieve in terms of looking back in the history of what those actual transfers were. But I'm just giving you that as an upper bound. And if you do the math, I think it's in the
$40,000 per hour.
Yeah, I think it's in the tens of millions.
Yeah. Okay, and that's the up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think actually,
that's a helpful way to start thinking about it. Thanks.
Mary, I think Rob has his hand up first, if you don't mind. Member Consiolco, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Greg. Guillermo, thank you for this presentation. As Angelina had stated, excellent overview of something that is a very deep dive. And, recognizing that you are presenting information that was really sort of the first 1/3 of the phase here. I do kind of think you just answered my upcoming question, as well as Mark did. I'm going to ask you is, based on what you've seen so far, are you seeing anything that would indicate that we have a red flag, that there's something that we should be looking at further, or we should be reassessing anything? So I'll leave it at that at this point.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think this is a very organic process. We have a partial set of analysis that is just unraveling the implications of this methodology, and we indeed haven't gone close enough to assess the actual methodology. I believe that once we reach the second stage, when we have more assessment of the incentives and implications, that will give us more color to see how stable or how solid we are with the approach. Based on the preliminary information that we have, I think is as expected. And the complication to move from this preliminary analysis and make a conclusion and extend a conclusion for, is this too bad or too good to move forward? I think we're still missing the second stage of the analysis that could give us better bridging to understand the actual implications. As we develop more analysis, I think in the second phase, we are going to be in a better place to have a better appreciation where we are standing.
This is Anna. I just wanted to add some additional commentary on that. I think the answer to your question is no. At this time, we don't see a reason to take any dramatic action to change our proposal. But it does, the analysis thus far does indicate and confirm some of the differences in how the parallel flows impact each other's system. And it's not a surprise because we kind of understood that before, but it does confirm that. And I think it's really important that we continue our analysis, Guillermo says, but also, starting that stakeholder process is really critical because that's where you start looking at alternatives for the long-term design. So just wanted to iterate, I think the answer to your question is, at this time, we do not see anything that requires us to stop from going forward. If, as a matter of fact, what we see at this time is continue doing what we're doing, the analysis, the market design, and keep going forward.
Governor Leslie?
So, Anna, to that point, if you were to extrapolate into the fuller market, right, which is 7 partners at the moment, right, and then potentially 4 more, does that impact the parallel flow when you incorporate, for instance, the 7 current partners and as they come online? And are you going to continue to model out? And then after you answer all that, the question is, answer.
Oh, I was just, oh, I was just going to quickly say, I think the answer to both questions are yes and yes. I think that, the flows will change as new entrants come in. And that's part of the, our responsibility and duty to look at how the power flows are affected as this goes on. But I am hopeful that by the time you get to the next, entrance, hopefully we'll start having a different design that doesn't depend on this kind of like arrangement. So that's sort of the key to that. But sorry, Mark, I didn't want to.
The only thing I would add is that I think as you add more entities, it's not just about parallel flow with the CAISO versus other balancing areas. It's also parallel flow between other balancing areas. So the analysis becomes a bit more complex, and the conclusions get a little bit more dynamic.
Governor Edo?
First of all, thank you, Guillermo. This is a terrific kind of analysis. I'm glad we're doing this now. It's very informative, revealing things we've obviously thought about, but now can start putting numbers around. I want to go back to Anna. You said 2 days in November, we were going to start the CRA work with the stakeholder initiative. And you also said that another part of this work has to go into the CRR stakeholder process. When is that going to start?
Well, that's going on right now. And that's been going on for the past year. We've done a lot of analytics. Guillermo provided, and his team provided a really deep dive into what are the sources of congestion revenue inadequacy with the, CRRs. And so we've been doing a lot of work with stakeholders around that. And we're now moving to the next phase of solutions on those root causes. There is a parallel with regards to the parallel flow. Sorry, I didn't mean to use that twice, but hate using loop flow. But there is a parallel with parallel flows in that discussion, and it's how that it interacts with each other. And I think it's important that we really do think about that in a holistic way from a congestion revenue adequacy perspective.
So I'm just delighted to hear that they're both moving forward expeditiously.
Absolutely, you'll see in the roadmap.
Anticipation of more entities. So good on you all. Thank you.
Yeah, we will not stop doing that. We've been committed to making sure that the CR models are robust and we evaluate those things, probably about a 3-year cycle, I would say. That's not going to stop ever. That's important work.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions from the dais? Okay. So at this time, if there's anybody in the room that wants to make a public comment, please come forward now. Seeing none. Silas, please inquiry to the virtual attendees.
If you would like to make a public comment, you can please press the raise hand icon on Zoom or #2 on the phone only line. So far, we do have one hand up in the queue. Mohammed, you have been sent a prompt to unmute yourself. You should be able to go ahead.
Hello, this is Mohammed Al-Karawi with FDNY. I just want to start by thanking Guillermo for his analysis. It's a great insight into what's happening in the market, and also thank the board for this opportunity to offer some comments. The first one is I would love if we can get some more details regarding this analysis. Like what are the sources and things that are used for to determine the flow between Pacific Corp East and West, and like, is it their generators, and how is that determined? And then another point is the WEC really has a lot of PARs, and how are the PARs set up? Are they set up to increase the loop flow through CAISO, to reduce it? Could we see them operate in a way that would exacerbate this issue? We're already seeing about 40% to up to, from the graphs, 80% contribution. So how would the like the phase shifter operations impact this?
Sure.
Thanks, Jim.
Sorry, go
And
ahead.
yeah, one point that I really would like to stress is that right now the Western EIM is really participating in real-time markets only. They really are coming with basically optimized day-ahead schedule, and they have dealt with their congestion mainly in their kind of like day-ahead processes, whatever these are. They are not mainly using the market to deal with real-time congestion, and that's why we see much more congestion inside of CAISO than external than in the Western EIM entities. So simply because we are seeing like limited impact of congestion external to CAISO and PACE, that does not really translate to the future. The only because they could PACE could select to start using the market to its full potential and would see much more congestion as they in the day ahead. And my last comment is that we are really in this process giving outrights a very differential and a higher priority to the two CRRs. And this is kind of like really exacerbated during outages. So during outages, the flow, like the CRRs allocated and awarded are basically are derated based on the outages, but now PACE and external systems get priority to the CAISO transmission system using outrights. And while currently they basically can transact between each other using bilateral transactions, they don't get a portion of the congestion rent, even though they don't pay into it. But in the future, they will get a portion of the congestion rent, which seems rather interesting, and maybe the California entities would be interested in looking how their transmission system is really kind of they're taking a back seat to utilizing. Yeah, and these are all the comments that I want to make. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for the comments. Let me respond to the four main topics that you elaborated on. And let me start with the last one. I think you are bringing very good policy items for discussion that are naturally to be discussed in the space of the policy. I would encourage you to participate in both the congestion revenue process and also in the upcoming congestion revenue allocation policy stakeholder process. Now, coming back to your first question about the assumptions or considerations we're making for generation or for dispatches in the analysis that we're presenting. The fortunate thing of using historical information is that we don't need to go into that level of detail because we already know what the solution is. Granted, it's going to be based on how participants bid, how they activated different constraints in the system. It is what it is. This is the historical information that happens to be financially and operational binding information of the Western energy imbalance market. We don't make any assumptions to overwrite that historical information. The second point is that we also don't make any assumptions of how the phase shifters or any other transmission constraints should be operated or otherwise, because again, this is predicated on the actual historical information that reflects how these constraints were managed in the system. No need for assumptions. The third point, I hear you, and yes, this is the congestion that whatever process is implemented to define what constraints are going to be activated and congested in the system is per the procedure they have in the real time. I can tell you that there is an ongoing process in preparation for the implementation of the extended day-ahead market that goes into ensuring that there is a common, consistent approach for constraints enforcement in preparation for the extended day-ahead market. That applies not only to the California ISO balancing area protocols, but also for the Pacific Corporation protocols, and that is going to be in place. Whether that is going to translate into more or less constraints to be congested, that's subject to be seen.
Hey, Guillermo, I just thought maybe help. I think there was a question embedded in there as well with regards to the validity of the analysis, given that it's on real-time data only. And I think that there was some discussion around concerns with that, but I believe your analysis did incorporate the base schedule impacts on and that completes the full look of the flow on each other's system. Is that right? Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Thanks, Guillermo.
Okay, if there are any other, oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, just thank Guillermo for his answer. Thank you.
Got it. Silas, if there are any other questions, please let us know.
There are no other hands up in the comment queue.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we'll be moving on then to agenda item 6, briefing on greenhouse gas coordination initiative. I do want to take this moment to acknowledge 2 public comment letters. One was received from PacifiCorp. The other one was from Western Power Trading Forum. Both letters have been provided to the both bodies as well as posted publicly. I'm going to turn this back over to Ann again.
Thank you, Greg. Well, it is my pleasure to introduce Anya Gilbert, a newly minted, to use Elliot's terms, I love that term, newly minted Manager of Policy Development. Congratulations, Anya. She will be presenting to us today a proposal that stakeholders and Anya have been working on for some time now. Not a proposal, but design for reporting requirements on greenhouse gas requirements. And with that, I will turn it over to Anya.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, Chair Wagner, Chair Bornstein, members of the governing body and Board of Governors. It's a pleasure to come and present the accounting and reporting approach. Before I begin, I do want to emphasize that this does not necessitate a change to our tariff. There is no change to our market. It is purely a data transparency measure. And for that reason, it is an informational briefing today. So with that, let's move to the next slide. So the Greenhouse Gas Working Group produced a solution. We call it the Greenhouse Gas Accounting and Reporting Approach. And it was really developed with the intent to support market participants that are subject to state, local, or corporate climate commitments that are not based on a price of carbon. And in reflecting this, there's recognition that climate goals that do not price carbon still require emission reductions, and it can influence resource planning and procurement. However, as we all know, wholesale electricity markets really are designed to optimize for least cost and do not track what resources serve specific load. So what this approach does is provide post-market emissions data to help participants demonstrate the impact of their actions. And before we move on to the next slide, I do want to kind of answer a common question we receive. And that's really, how this sits with our in-market design. So our in-market design allows market participants to reflect their cost of compliance with either the California or Washington cap and invest programs. And this accounting and reporting approach sits alongside that. And these approaches answer different questions. The in-market design really answers the question, what generation, when we consider the energy and GHG bid, serves the California or Washington GHG region at least cost? Whereas this approach, this transparency measure, answers the question of what was the emissions intensity of the generation that served my load. So with that, let's get into how the approach works on the next slide. So the accounting and reporting approach really overlays ownership and contract data with the market dispatch results to produce data that allows a reporting entity to see and understand the emissions intensity of the supply that served their load. And it's worth noting what we mean by reporting entity. It's a flexible term. It does need to be a market participant, but it can be a balancing authority area, a load-serving entity, even an independent power producer. So with that said, I have a stylized example here on how we can think about how the approach works. If we have a load-serving entity that has 18 megawatt hours of load in a given hour, the approach unpacks the source of those emissions. And with that ownership and contract overlay in this example, we can see that the load was served with 10 megawatt hours that came from gas, solar, and hydro, and 8 megawatts that came from what we refer to in the greenhouse gas accounting world as the residual rate, which is made up of all unowned, uncontracted, or otherwise surplus emissions in that hour. So let's go to the next slide to unpack a little bit what the approach produces. The approach produces two things. First, a market-wide residual rate data set, and second, the option to have a customized report for the reporting entity. That public market-wide residual rate data set represents the emissions intensity of all the megawatts that were on the system in that given hour that were unowned, uncontracted, or otherwise determined to be surplus. Whereas the optional entity-specific customized report gives that reporting entity insights and visibility into the emissions intensity of the supply that served their load. So to put this in equation, we can sum up at the top what the owned and contracted resources were that were dispatched by the market, recognizing that the in-market design might mean that that reporting entity is actually serving California or Washington. We subtract out what was attributed or given a GHG award to serve California or Washington if applicable. And then we do have a pricing region adjustment, just recognizing in the periods that California or Washington are net importing, the reporting entities in California or Washington, only during those periods of net import, can share if there is surplus and if someone is short. After we add that up, we compare that with the reporting entity's load. If they generated from their portfolio more than their load, excess is allocated to that residual rate data set. However, if they were a net buyer, meaning their portfolio did not meet their load, we add in the megawatt hours and associated emissions using that residual rate data set for that hour. And so what you see on the right-hand side is the same example from our previous slide with that 10 megawatt hours of owned and contracted resources, and then recognizing they were a net buyer from the market, we're adding in using the residual emissions rate data set to produce two things, the megawatt hours that were consumed in that hour, along with the metric tons of carbon. With that, let's move to the next slide. There's three.
I just have a very quick question.
Oh,
with that.
yes.
With regards to the data set, will that be made available? Will it be visible somewhere? Or is it something that, just for the reporting entities and the reporting purpose? I'm just wondering.
The public market-wide residual rate data set will be public, whereas the optional entity-specific customized reports would only be available to the reporting entity.
They can make them public if they want to, but we're not. Okay.
Correct.
So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. So there's three key elements to the accounting and reporting approach: registration, calculation, and then data publication. During registration, we're really looking to associate the resources with the appropriate entity at the correct time. Just recognizing some contracts can be for a year, some can be for an hour. That association is important. We then have a calculation phase that represents the information I ran through on the previous slide to really total the market dispatch results and allocate those emissions correctly. Lastly, in our data publication phase, we're really providing transparency through reporting, both through that public market-wide residual rate data set and that entity-specific report offering. Next slide. I really want to emphasize the fact that state coordination has been key to this effort, particularly when designing approaches that can potentially be used for state compliance. I really want to thank our state partners and staff for their time and resources and thoughtful input into this effort, and emphasize that the accounting and reporting approach is really intended for informational purposes to support reporting entities and regulators. We've designed it in a way to accommodate state programs and provide deference to states throughout the process in terms of directives they want to provide their regulated entities in developing the report. But it will ultimately be those state and local regulators that decide and determine if the data can be used for reporting purposes, if there is a reporting framework in place. Next slide. Lastly, I wanted to run through the stakeholder process and our implementation of this approach. We have had robust participation, broad support for this effort. This effort began with the Greenhouse Gas Coordination Working Group in August of 2023. We first heard this proposal from our stakeholders in April of 2024, and there's been robust dialogue with our stakeholders and state partners, recognizing the efforts involved in participating in 10 working group meetings. We even took a group of volunteers from that group to kind of help accelerate the design of the approach. We refer to that as our subgroup, and we had met with them 13 times in biweekly meetings. We had 95 sets of comments, state input, and 4 papers to ultimately produce the approach that we shared with you today. So really appreciate the stakeholder engagement and support, and also extend our gratitude for that level of participation and thoughtful response in helping develop and refine the approach. We do plan to have this available for market participants post EDAM Go Live. And with that, I'd like to open it up to see if there's any questions or comments.
Go ahead, Member Smith.
Quick question, thank you, and great presentation. I really appreciate it. And I'm an accountant, so I love the clarity of the approach. Thank you. I'm curious though, you're clear that it's up to individual states whether this information or the report in the data, and you're probably specifically talking about the residual sets or the, is that the word that we use for it? Anyway, you said that states will have to decide whether that information meets the compliance needs of the utility or of the load serving entity. Have you talked with Washington, California? I mean, do you have any sense? Were they involved in developing the proposal?
Absolutely. And again, because this is really designed, not just for state purposes, but also for corporate compliance. There are also examples of local compliance. You can think of LA 100 as a local goal, but it was co-developed. But we also recognize this approach is essentially moving faster than some of those state regulations. So building in deference, recognizing they may still be evolving and shaping their regulations after this approach was finalized was key to the approach. Thank you.
Any other questions from the dais? Yeah, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Governor Leslie. Oh, microphone.
I just wanted to thank you profusely for this. I thought you articulated it really well because it's complicated. I haven't understood it for years, but you made sense. But that last point you just made, I think is really important, that the implications of this data for policy development and for meeting goals. And I'm also curious if you think people actually understand their data set, or will this be very illuminating to get this data?
Any other questions?
We have provided draft data sets to explain what the metrics we produce will look like to facilitate that understanding. So I hope that has helped in the process, and we've received feedback on kind of the metrics and how those are displayed. But I think it'll take time and further education along the way. So thank you for that question.
Campbell.
Thank you. A comment, Anya. Thank you for all the work you did on this initiative. Thanks to other CAISO staff. the tremendous effort that stakeholders put into this. I love sort of the graphic here, the circle of everyone was talking to each other, but then you did push forward with the arrow to a timely conclusion. I think something that that the CAISO has done really well through the EIM process and into EDAM that's carried forward into AB 825 is really respecting and accommodating and facilitating state policies. I appreciate Western Power Trading Forum in their letter. They had a nice quote I just wanted to read that really captures the place that you've landed here, which is, it's essential that greenhouse gas accounting proposal can accommodate the diversity of state programs. It was equally important that the greenhouse gas accounting framework does not burden market participants in states without greenhouse gas goals or programs in any way. That's a hard place to land, and you have landed there in this initiative. So thanks for your work on this.
Thank you.
All right, Member Kanzioka.
Thank you. Anya, I want to echo the sentiments that were just articulated. Hard to repeat all that. And I do know that the breadth and complexity of this issue was much greater than I had imagined when it started. And the outcome is really positive. I specifically appreciate these comments and then what you had stated regarding the flexibility. Just about all the states that don't have a state requirement have utilities that have goals and objectives. And so I think that was really, really important to have all of that built in. And then lastly, on the public access to data, I don't know who is going to do analysis, but I imagine there are a number of professors and universities that will look at how they can use this data and do analysis that will further us along. So really good outcome, and thank you and for bringing this to completion. And I hope that we see some updates down the road on how it's been used. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And a quick follow-up on Member Konzioka's comments. It's really great to have the data be flexible, to have granularity so that even if it's a state that doesn't require reporting, that individual utilities can track and have the data that's available. I'm still curious about how will the data be made available? Do they come to the ISO and request the ISO for the information? Do they have to have some form of standing? What if it's a university? As we said, there might be a university that's interested. Can they come in and request the data? Just curious, do we have kind of definitions around that? Because it could get very fluid very quickly.
I think there's a host of metrics that we provide today, and I think through the implementation process of this approach, we'll kind of get closer to exactly how is it made available, but looking to make it publicly available.
As much as possible, I would encourage that as well. But yeah, thank you. This will be fascinating and really great work. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions on the dais? No? Okay, at this time, then I'll open up to anybody in the room. If anybody has public comment. Seeing none, Silas, please make that inquiry to the virtual attendees.
If you'd like to make a public comment, you can please press the raise hand icon on your Zoom screen. We do have one hand up in the queue. Jonah, you've been sent a prompt to unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, Chair Wagner, Chair Bornstein, members of the governing body and the Board of Governors. Jonah Cabral with Portland General Electric, and wanted to thank you for providing the opportunity to comment on the Greenhouse Gas Coordination Initiative. So for context, PGE, we are an energy imbalance market participant, and we will go live in the extended day-ahead market next fall. So with that context, I wanted to thank, first off, the CAISO staff and all the stakeholders who were involved for a very collaborative and thoughtful process throughout this very lengthy coordination. Anya, I didn't realize how many public comments and how many meetings we'd had, but it does reflect how long and how hard stakeholders did work on this. So for PGE, we've been very interested in this initiative. In Oregon, our policy is unique, just like it is across the region. We have that emissions cap, but no associated price. and from an emissions baseline, the 80% reduction target by 2030, going to a 100% baseline reduction by 2040. And again, no price associated with those targets. At the same time, our participation in EDAM and specifically the economic benefits of a day-ahead market optimization, the value there is critical for PGE and our customers. So I highlight that because institutionally, I would say we've learned a lot. Just broadly throughout PGE, we've increased our expertise on GHG policy, policy design, policy choices, including how those interface with regional markets. And again, I think that is a testament to all the participants in this GHG working group process. So CAISO staff, people, other entities who presented their perspectives, and that holistic knowledge has really shown up for us. And it's just been a very robust process. So Anya did go through all the important points, but just wanted to highlight that it is, again, a meaningful milestone. This emissions transparency without altering the market dispatch is super important for us. And again, it's very useful for non-price participants. This is a tool that we really did need to help push us towards that, extended market participation. So there are a couple elements, again, that are important. That flexibility for states was key. That standardization of emissions factors also super important. And again, just that granular residual rate value is going to be key, again, for reaching our compliance targets. And again, just appreciate the balanced nature of the stakeholder process and of the final design, and the preservation of that market merit order. And again, there's a lot of work for us in operationalizing the report. We're looking forward to staying engaged in the kind of the next steps, the IT BPM development. So we will stay engaged there. But overall, it's been a very important foundation for the continued regional growth that we are. And the day-ahead market, it is something that is key for our participation there. So wanted to just, again, thank the CAISO staff for a very robust process, and a particular thanks to Anya Gilbert, that it has just been something where we have learned a lot. And Anya, you helped the whole working group kind of be heard, bring together varying perspectives. And I just thought it was a great example of the best of bringing people together and finding a consensus in a considered, equitable way. And of course, thank you to regional stakeholders who helped keep this process collaborative. Again, we are happy with the final outcome, and thanks to all. So thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Jonah.
Greg,
Yes, go ahead.
this actually raised a question that I had thought about and forgotten. What is the temporal granularity that you're thinking about for the data and for the analysis?
It is hourly data.
Really? So
Yeah.
you're going to have contract information on an hourly basis.
Contract and load data. Those are the two key inputs.
Right? That'll be exciting to see.
Okay, Silas, are there any other questions online?
No, there are no other hands up in our queue.
Okay, thank you. All right, so moving quickly forward, we're going to information reports. Put it to the governing body and the board if anybody has any comments or questions on the information reports. Seeing none. Anybody in the room? Oh, sorry, Rob. I always forget about you. My bad. Go ahead,
No
Rob.
problems. I understand. I'll be very, very brief. I just want to express my appreciation for the information and detail in the market performance update. I found it very helpful. It's addressing a lot of the questions we've had over a fairly lengthy period of time, and very instructive. And I think we are moving things in the right direction. So my appreciation to staff, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob. All right, anybody in the room? Seeing none? Silas, please check online.
If you'd like to make a comment, you can press the raise hand icon on Zoom or #2 on the phone only line. Okay, no hands up from attendees.
Okay, thank you. So final item is any future agenda items from anybody? Standing item, none. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.